The first signs appeared on Kepler 442b, a thriving Zephyrian colony world known for its crystal gardens and philosophical academies. Dr. Zethkal, the colony's chief medical officer, initially dismissed the reports as seasonal allergies. The symptoms seemed minor enough: a slight bluish tint to the normally silver-scaled skin, occasional fatigue, and what the patients described as mind fog. Within 72 hours, the first Zephyrian died. Zethkal's four eyes widened as he examined the corpse. The victim's scales had turned completely blue-black, their internal organs had crystallized, and most disturbing of all, their brain tissue showed signs of rapid decomposition that had somehow continued after death. In his 3 centuries of medical practice across 17 different worlds, he had never seen anything like it. By the end of the first week, 12,000 Zephyrians were dead. By the end of the second week, the entire colony world had gone silent. The plague spread with a ruthless efficiency that defied conventional understanding of disease transmission. It jumped between star systems without any apparent vector, appearing simultaneously on worlds that had no contact with infected areas. The Galactic Health Council's best epidemiologists were baffled. Some species seemed completely immune, while others succumbed within hours of first symptoms. The Andromedan Collective, with their advanced quantum biology, managed to slow the progression in their populations but could not stop it. The crystalline Vorthan attempted to isolate themselves by sealing their worlds behind energy barriers, only to discover the plague had somehow already reached their core systems. The gaseous nebulites found that their distributed consciousness offered no protection. The disease attacked their neural networks with surgical precision. Commander Veltar of the Galactic Defense Fleet stood in the war room aboard the flagship Eternal Vigilance, staring at the tactical display that showed the plague spread across the galaxy. Red dots marked infected systems, each one representing billions of lives lost or dying. In just 6 months, the plague had consumed 47 star systems and was accelerating. Status report, Veltar commanded, his mandibles clicking with barely controlled anxiety. Lieutenant Krixner, a young insectoid officer, manipulated the holographic display. The plague has reached the inner colonies. Zephyria Prime reports 80% mortality rate. The healer cast on Mendel has declared their world lost. And sir, she paused, her antennae twitching nervously, the plague has been detected in the Sol system. A collective shudder ran through the assembled officers. Humanity's home system was heavily defended and notoriously isolated. If the plague had reached Earth, it could reach anywhere. What's the human response? Veltar asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Humans had a reputation for extreme solutions to extreme problems. That's, unusual, sir. Instead of quarantining Earth and their colonies, they've begun mobilizing what they call their Mercy Fleet. Long-range sensors showed dozens of ships leaving human space, heading directly toward infected systems. Veltar's compound eyes focused on the display. Human ship signatures were distinctive, angular, brutal-looking vessels that seemed designed more for war than exploration. But these ships showed modified configurations, with large red crosses painted on their hulls. Are they evacuating their people from infected worlds? No, sir. Intelligence reports suggest they're heading towards the most heavily infected systems, the ones we've already written off as lost. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Every officer knew humanity's reputation. They were the galaxy's newest members, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago, but they had quickly established themselves as a force to be respected and feared. Humans were innovative, adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when threatened. They had turned their entire species' violent history into a weapon against the galaxy's enemies. But this behavior was unprecedented. Humans didn't run toward hopeless situations to save others. They were survivors, not martyrs. Sir, Communications Officer Threndel spoke up, his blue-scaled features reflecting the bridge lights. We're receiving a transmission from the human vessel, Clara Barton. They're requesting permission to enter Zephyrian space. Veltar's mandibles clicked in confusion. Zephyrian space had been declared a dead zone 3 days ago. No ship had entered the area in weeks, and for good reason. Every vessel that had attempted rescue operations had either been destroyed or had fled when their crews began showing symptoms. On screen, the main display shimmered and resolved into the image of a human female, her dark skin marked with what appeared to be ritual scars, her black hair pulled back in a practical style. She wore a white coat over what looked like military fatigues, and her brown eyes held an intensity that made several of the bridge officers step backward instinctively. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief Medical Officer of the UHMS Clara Barton. We're requesting immediate clearance to enter Zephyrian space and begin emergency medical operations. Veltar leaned forward in his command chair. Dr. Chen, I don't think you understand the situation. Zephyrian space is under complete quarantine. The plague has a 100% mortality rate for your species' physiology. Any ship entering that area is effectively committing suicide. Dr. Chen's expression didn't change. Commander, I understand the risks perfectly. We've run the biological compatibility models. But we have treatments that might be effective, and people are dying right now while we have this conversation. Every minute we delay costs lives. You have treatments? Lieutenant Crixer interrupted, her excitement causing her to forget protocol. The Galactic Health Council has been working for months without success. How could humans, who have barely been in space for 2 centuries, develop something our greatest medical minds could not? A slight smile crossed Dr. Chen's face, but it wasn't reassuring. There was something predatory about it, something that reminded every alien on the bridge exactly why humans had earned their fearsome reputation. Lieutenant, you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about human medicine. Your species developed healing arts over millions of years of peaceful evolution. You learned to cure diseases that killed slowly, to heal injuries that occurred naturally, to extend lives that were already long by galactic standards. She leaned closer to the camera, and her eyes seemed to bore into each officer personally. Humans learned medicine while we were killing each other. For 10,000 years, we fought wars that produced injuries your people can't imagine. We created diseases as weapons, then had to learn to cure them when they inevitably turned on us. We built our entire medical science around the principle that anything that can kill can be beaten, and anything that can be beaten will be beaten no matter the cost. The bridge was absolutely silent. Several officers had unconsciously moved away from the screen. Our Mercy ships don't carry the same kind of medical equipment your hospital vessels use, Commander. They carry equipment designed to keep soldiers alive in conditions that would kill them 10 times over. They carry medicines that were developed to counteract biological weapons. They carry doctors who learned their trade in wars that consumed entire planets. Dr. Chen straightened, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had never lost a patient she was determined to save. The Zephyrian plague is killing your people because it's unlike anything your medical science has encountered. But humans have encountered worse, much worse. And we've learned to cure things that were designed specifically to be incurable. Beltar found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. What do you need from us? Nothing, Commander. We're not asking for help, and we're not asking for resources. We're informing you as a courtesy that human Mercy ships will be entering infected systems to provide medical aid to any survivors we find. You can help by staying out of our way, or you can hinder us by trying to stop us. But understand this. We're going to save as many lives as we can, regardless of what you decide. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Lieutenant Crixner was the first to speak. Sir, should we alert the other fleets? If humans are planning some kind of military operation in the infected zones, no. Veltar said quietly, his eyes still fixed on the now empty screen. This isn't a military operation, Lieutenant. I think we just witnessed something else entirely. He turned to his communications officer. Threndel, send a message to all Defense Fleet commanders. Human vessels marked with red crosses are to be given complete clearance to any system they request. No questions, no delays, no interference. Sir? Even into quarantine zones? Veltar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully as he stared at the tactical display, where human ship signatures were already moving toward the galaxy's most hopeless battles, especially into quarantine zones, officer. I have a feeling we're about to learn something very important about our newest galactic neighbors. As the Eternal Vigilance adjusted course to monitor the human fleet movements, none of the crew could shake the feeling that they had just witnessed the opening of something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans weren't running from the plague or trying to protect themselves from it. They were hunting it. In the depths of space, the human Mercy ship, Clara Barton, accelerated toward the Zephyrian system, its red cross gleaming against the black hull like a promise written in starlight. Behind it, 43 other human vessels followed, each one carrying equipment and personnel that had been designed for one purpose: to fight death itself and win. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the Clara Barton's medical bay, reviewing patient protocols with her team. Around her, equipment hummed and clicked in rhythms that would have been alien to most galactic medical facilities. These weren't the gentle, sterile tools of peaceful healing. They were weapons in humanity's oldest war, the war against death, disease, and despair. Doctor, her chief nurse called out, "We're receiving distress signals from multiple sources in the Zephyrian system. It looks like there are still survivors on at least 12 worlds." Doctor, Chen nodded. her hands already moving to prepare the equipment they would need. "Then we'd better hurry," she said simply. "People are counting on us." As the human fleet entered the dead zone of Zephyrian space, every sensor in the galaxy turned to watch. What happened next would either be humanity's greatest triumph or their final tragedy. But for the humans aboard those mercy ships, there was no question about the outcome. They had come to save lives, and they would save lives, because that's what humans did when people were dying, even if those people were aliens who had never trusted them, even if the odds were impossible, even if it killed them. The hunt for the Zephyrian plague had begun. The first thing Dr. Sarah Chin noticed about Zephyria Prime was the silence. Where scanners should have detected millions of communication signals, traffic control broadcasts, and the general electromagnetic chatter of a thriving civilization, there was nothing but the cold whisper of cosmic background radiation. The planet below looked like a jewel from orbit, blue oceans, white clouds, green landmasses, but it was a dead jewel, beautiful and lifeless. "Atmospheric analysis complete," reported Lieutenant Commander Harrison Wells, the Clara Barton science officer. "Oxygen levels are normal, but we're detecting massive amounts of biological decay. Whatever happened down there, it happened fast." Dr. Chen stood in the ship's primary medical bay, surrounded by equipment that most alien physicians would have mistaken for torture devices. Auto-surgical units with dozens of articulated arms hung from the ceiling like mechanical spiders. Nanofabrication units capable of manufacturing custom pharmaceuticals in real time lined the walls. In one corner, a containment unit held samples of every biological weapon humanity had ever developed, along with their corresponding treatments. "Life signs?" she asked, though she kept her voice neutral. Hope was a luxury they couldn't afford yet. Scattered readings across the southern continent. Maybe 10,000 individuals concentrated in what looks like a medical complex. The signals are weak. 10,000 survivors out of a population of 4 billion. Dr. Chen had seen worse odds during the Titan colony plague outbreak, but not many. "Prep the shuttles," she ordered. "Full hazmat protocols. I want mobile surgical units, broad-spectrum antiviral packages, and emergency life support for 30,000 patients." "Ma'am," Nurse Patterson spoke up, her voice carefully controlled. "Our intelligence reports suggest the Zephyrian physiology is completely incompatible with human medicine. Their cellular structure is silicon-based, their blood chemistry relies on copper compounds, and their nervous systems operate on quantum frequencies we barely understand." Dr. Chen looked up from the equipment she was checking, and Patterson took an involuntary step backward. The doctor's expression was the same one she'd worn during the Bangkok crisis, when she'd kept 40,000 people alive in conditions that should have killed them all. "Nurse in 2387. I treated Proximan refugees whose biology was based on liquid methane. In 2391, I performed surgery on a crystalloid whose body was literally made of living diamond. Last year, I successfully delivered twins from a woman whose pregnancy had been infected with a weaponized virus designed to kill both mother and children." She returned to her equipment, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "The universe keeps presenting us with patients whose biology says they should be impossible to treat. But here's the thing about human medicine, Patterson. We don't accept impossible. We find a way, or we make a way." 20 minutes later, 3 shuttles launched from the Clara Barton towards Zephyria Prime's surface. Each shuttle carried a full medical team, enough equipment to establish a field hospital, and one human doctor who had sworn an oath to do no harm, regardless of the species involved. The Zephyrian medical complex had once been a marvel of architectural achievement. Spiral towers of living crystal had housed the most advanced healing centers in the galaxy, where patients from dozens of species came for treatment that bordered on miraculous. Now, the crystal was dark and cracked, and the beautiful spirals were collapsing under their own weight. Dr. Chen's shuttle touched down in what had been a garden courtyard. The plants were all dead, their crystalline structures shattered like broken glass. The air itself felt wrong. Thick with the stench of decay and something else, something that made the humans' environmental suits trigger contamination warnings. "Biosings are coming from the central tower," Wells reported over the comm. "But Sarah, the energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's keeping those Zephyrians alive, it's drawing massive amounts of power." The human medical team moved through the complex with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated by years of working in hostile environments. They'd done this before, arrived too late, when all hope was gone, when the only thing left was to bear witness to tragedy. But as they reached the central tower's main medical bay, Dr. Chen realized they hadn't arrived too late. They had arrived in time to witness something unprecedented. The surviving Zephyrians had connected themselves to their own medical equipment in a way that defied understanding. Hundreds of them lay in crystalline beds, their bodies linked to machines that were somehow keeping them alive through pure force of will. Tubes of glowing liquid flowed between patients, sharing life force, memories, and consciousness itself. "My God," whispered Dr. Martinez, the team's xenobiologist. "They've turned themselves into a collective organism. They're keeping each other alive by sharing everything. Nutrients, neural activity, even genetic material." An aged Zephyrian detached himself from the collective network and approached the humans. His scales were the blue-black of advanced plague symptoms, but his 4 eyes burned with intelligence and desperate hope. "You are... humans?" he asked in halting standard. "The warriors who paint mercy on their warships?" "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. We're here to help." The Zephyrian's eyes widened, and he made a sound that might have been laughter or sobbing. "Help? Noble human, we have been dead for weeks. We persist only because we refuse to let our children die alone." Dr. Chen looked around the chamber and understood. The strongest adults had connected themselves to the network to keep the youngest alive. They were burning through their own life force to give their children a few more days, maybe hours. How many children? 3,207. The plague takes the adults first, but the young, they linger. We have perhaps one day before the network fails. "Doctor!" Chen activated her comm unit. "Wells, I need you to patch me through to every human ship in the system. Medical override, priority alpha." "Sarah, what are you doing?" "My job." The comm crackled. And suddenly Dr. Chen was speaking to every human doctor, nurse, and medic in the fleet. "This is Dr. Chen. We have 3,000 Zephyrian children in critical condition, dying from a plague that attacks their nervous systems. We have maybe 24 hours before they're beyond help. I need ideas, and I need them now." The response was immediate and chaotic. Doctors began sharing data, comparing notes, proposing treatments that ranged from brilliant to insane. It was the sound of human medicine at its finest, creative, desperate, and utterly unwilling to accept defeat. "Chen, this is Dr. Patel on the Nightingale. I'm seeing similarities to the neural plague we faced on Europa. If we could adapt the nanotherapy protocols..." "Negative, Patel. The Zephyrian nervous system operates on quantum frequencies. We need something that can interface directly with their consciousness." "What about the Mumbai treatment?" suggested Dr. Kim from the Asclepius. "We could modify the neural bridge technology we developed for coma patients." Dr. Chen's mind raced. The neural bridge technology was experimental, dangerous, and had never been tested on alien physiology. It involved creating a direct connection between human and patient consciousness, allowing human mental patterns to stabilize damaged neural networks. It was also potentially fatal to the human operator. That material might work, she said slowly. But we'd need human volunteers willing to link their minds directly to dying alien children. The psychological trauma alone could be devastating, not to mention the risk of neural feedback. "I'll do it." The voice came from behind her. "Doctor." Chen turned to see Nurse Patterson, her face pale but determined behind her helmet visor. "Patterson, you don't understand what you're volunteering for. This isn't like anything we've attempted before. We don't know if human consciousness is even compatible with Zephyrian neural patterns." "Doctor, I've been a trauma nurse for 15 years. I've held dying children while their parents begged me to save them. I've watched families destroyed by diseases we couldn't cure. If there's a chance, any chance, to save these kids, I'll take it." More voices joined in over the comm system. "Count me in," said Dr. Rodriguez from the Mercy's hand. "I didn't come out here to play it safe. The Florence Nightingale volunteers our entire pediatric unit," announced Chief Medical Officer Grant. "Whatever it takes." Within an hour, 67 human medical personnel had volunteered for an experimental procedure that might save 3,000 alien children or kill everyone involved. The Zephyrian collective watched in amazement as the humans began setting up equipment they'd never seen before. Neural interface units that looked more like torture devices than medical equipment. Dr. Chen worked with shaking hands to calibrate the neural bridges. The theory was sound, but theory and practice were different things entirely. She was asking her people to merge their consciousness with dying aliens, to use human willpower and determination to stabilize failing Zephyrian minds. "Sarah." "Doctor?" Martinez said quietly, "The energy requirements for this operation will drain our ship's power reserves completely. If this fails, we won't have enough power to leave the system. Then we'd better make sure it doesn't fail." The first neural bridge activated with a sound like breaking crystal. Nurse Patterson convulsed as her mind made contact with a dying Zephyrian child, her vital signs spiking into dangerous territory before stabilizing. On the monitor, the child's neural activity began to strengthen. "It's working, Dr. Kier," Chen breathed. "Patterson, how do you feel?" Like I'm carrying someone else's dreams," Patterson replied, her voice strange and distant. "She's so afraid, Doctor. But she's fighting." "God, she's fighting so hard to live." One by one, the neural bridges came online. Human medical personnel linked their minds to dying Zephyrian children, sharing consciousness, memory, and life force itself. The chamber filled with an eerie harmony as dozens of species barriers dissolved in the face of simple, desperate compassion. Dr. Chen monitored the process, making adjustments, coordinating treatments, and watching as something unprecedented unfolded. The children's vital signs were improving, but more than that, the adults in the collective network were beginning to show signs of recovery as well. "The children are serving as neural relays," Dr. Gruing Martinez reported in amazement. "The human consciousness patterns are being transmitted through them to the adults. It's like the children are teaching the collective how to fight the plague." Hours passed. The human volunteers grew exhausted, their minds strained by maintaining connections to alien consciousness. But none of them disconnected. None of them gave up. As the alien sun set over the ruined crystal gardens, Dr. Chen received a report that made her heart stop. "Doctor, we're getting life sign readings from across the planet. The plague symptoms are reversing in isolated populations. It's spreading outward from this facility like an immune response." The aged Zephyrian who had first greeted them approached Dr. Goki Chen, his scales now showing the silver sheen of health. "Human doctor," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "what have you done?" "Our people across the world are awakening. The plague retreats as if burned by fire." Dr. Chen looked around the chamber, where humans and Zephyrians were connected in ways that defied every law of biology and physics she knew. "We shared our stubbornness," she said simply. "Humans are very, very stubborn about refusing to die." The Zephyrian made that sound again. Definitely laughter this time. "Yes," he said. "We are beginning to understand this about your species. You do not know when you are defeated, do you?" "No," Dr. Chen replied, watching as another child's vital signs moved from critical to stable. "We really don't." As reports continued to pour in from across Zephyria Prime, it became clear that something unprecedented had happened. The plague wasn't just retreating. It was being actively destroyed by an immune response that had somehow spread from the neural bridge patients to the entire planetary population. Humanity's first mercy mission had not only saved 3,000 children, it had saved an entire world. Commander Veltar stared at the tactical display in complete disbelief. The red marker indicating Zephyria Prime, a world that had been declared dead 3 days ago, was now pulsing green. Not only were life signs returning across the entire planet, but the quantum signatures indicated something impossible. The plague was actually being destroyed at a molecular level. "Are you certain of these readings?" he demanded of his sensor operator. "Confirmed and triple-checked, sir. Zephyria Prime is showing a 97% recovery rate. The plague organism is not just dormant. It's being systematically eliminated by what appears to be an enhanced immune response." Lieutenant Krixner leaned over her console, her antennae twitching with excitement. "Sir, we're receiving similar reports from human mercy ships across 17 different systems. Every world they've visited is showing dramatic recovery rates." Veltar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. In 40 years of military service, he had never encountered anything that challenged his understanding of the universe quite like this. The humans had done something that the combined medical knowledge of 1,000 species could not accomplish, and they had done it in a matter of hours. "Get me a direct line to Dr. Byron Chen." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what looked like a mobile surgical unit. Dr. Chen appeared exhausted, her dark hair disheveled and her medical coat stained with substances that definitely weren't human blood. Behind her, human and Zephyrian medical personnel worked side by side, treating patients with equipment that looked like it belonged in a mad scientist's laboratory. "Commander Veltar," she said without preamble, "I hope you're calling with good news because we're a little busy here. Dr. Courtier." "Chen, I need to understand what happened on Zephyria Prime. Our sensors indicate that you've not only stopped the plague, but somehow created an immunity that's spreading across the entire population." Dr. Chen paused in her work and looked directly at the camera. "Commander, what do you know about human medical history? I know that your species has a reputation for Unconventional solutions to complex problems. A tired smile crossed her face. That's diplomatic. The truth is, humans learned medicine the hard way. We've been fighting plagues, diseases, and biological warfare for thousands of years. But more importantly, we've learned something that most species never had to discover. She turned back to her patient, a young Zephyrian whose scales were returning to their healthy silver color. We learned that biology isn't destiny. When a disease says it's incurable, when experts say a patient is beyond help, when logic says that death is inevitable, humans say, prove it. We don't accept limitations imposed by biology, physics, or common sense. But the neural bridge technology you used, our xenobiologists say it should be impossible for human consciousness to interface with Zephyrian neural patterns. Your xenobiologists are thinking like scientists, Commander. We were thinking like doctors. When you're watching a child die, you don't care about theoretical impossibilities. You find a way to make the impossible work. On another part of the screen, Velta could see human medical personnel working with equipment that seemed to blend advanced technology with what looked like pure determination. They moved with a controlled urgency that spoke of experience with desperate situations. Dr. Chen, we're receiving reports that the immunity effect is spreading beyond the worlds your ships have visited. Systems that haven't had contact with human medical teams are showing spontaneous plague resistance. Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. We noticed that too, Commander. The neural bridge connections created more than just individual immunity. They established what my xenobiologist calls a quantum immune network. The resistance patterns are being shared across space through quantum entanglement effects we don't fully understand. Are you saying that the treatment is spreading itself? I'm saying that when you connect human stubbornness to an alien collective consciousness, you get something neither species anticipated. The Zephyrians have a natural ability to share information through quantum neural networks. Humans have an absolute refusal to accept defeat. When you combine those traits, she gestured at the recovered patients around her. You get an immune system that doesn't just protect individuals. It protects entire species across multiple star systems. Before Veltar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance. His communications officer looked up with an expression of shock. Sir, we're receiving emergency broadcasts from the Andromedan Collective. They're reporting massive plague outbreaks on their core worlds. The infection rate is accelerating beyond anything we've seen before. Veltar's compound eyes widened. The Andromedans were the galaxy's most advanced species, with technology that bordered on the miraculous, and lifespans measured in millennia. If the plague was overwhelming their defenses, the situation was far worse than anyone had realized. Dr. Shagar. Chen, did you hear that? Already mobilizing, she replied, and Veltar could see human personnel in the background beginning to pack equipment with practiced efficiency. The Clara Barton and 12 other Mercy ships can reach Andromedan space in 36 hours.
Doctor, the Andromedans have made it clear that they don't want outside intervention.
Their pride in their medical superiority is significant. Doctor, Chen's expression hardened. Commander, I've dealt with prideful patients before. Pride is a luxury you give up when people start dying. If the Andromedans want to maintain their superiority complex while their people die, that's their choice. But we're going anyway. They might fire on your ships. Then they'll fire on ships marked with medical crosses, and they'll have to live with that decision. But we're not letting people die because of politics. The transmission ended, leaving Veltar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their growing understanding of humanity's nature. Sir, Lieutenant Krixner said quietly, should we warn the Andromedans that humans are coming? No, Veltar replied after a moment. Let them be surprised. I have a feeling they're about to learn something important about the species they've been dismissing as primitive. In the depths of space, the human Mercy fleet was already adjusting course toward Andromedan territory. Aboard the Clara Barton, Dr. Chen stood in the primary medical bay, reviewing data from their successful treatments, while her team prepared for what might be their most challenging mission yet. Dr. Martinez approached with a tablet full of analysis reports. The Andromedan physiology is completely different from anything we've treated. They exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their consciousness spans several quantum states, and their biology operates on principles we barely comprehend. Dr. Rakovich. Chen looked up from her equipment calibrations. Martinez, in the last 6 months, we've successfully treated crystal beings, energy creatures, hive minds, and collective consciousnesses. The universe keeps presenting us with patients who are theoretically impossible to help. She turned to address her entire medical team. who had gathered in the bay. People, we're about to attempt something that every expert in the galaxy will tell you is impossible. We're going to treat patients whose biology exists in dimensions we can't see, whose consciousness operates on principles we don't understand, and whose society has spent 10,000 years perfecting medical techniques we've never imagined. The team listened with the focused attention of professionals who had already achieved several miracles and were prepared to attempt another. But here's what I know about human medicine, Dr. Chen continued. We don't treat theory, we treat patients. And every patient, regardless of their species, their biology, or their dimensional existence, wants to live. Our job is to find a way to help them do that. Dr. Kim raised her hand. What if the neural bridge technology doesn't work on multidimensional beings? Then we'll modify it until it does work. We'll adapt, improvise, and overcome. Because that's what humans do when people are dying. And if the Andromedans refuse our help? Asked Nurse Patterson, who still showed signs of fatigue from her neural bridge experience with the Zephyrian children. Dr. Chen's expression took on the determined look that her team had learned to associate with incoming miracles.
Then we'll help them anyway.
Because that's what mercy means. You give it to people who don't ask for it, don't deserve it, and don't want it. You give it because they need it. And because you're human. And because humans don't let people die if there's any way to prevent it. As the human fleet approached Andromedan space, long-range sensors detected something that made every xenobiologist in the galaxy stop and stare at their readings. The plague wasn't just attacking Andromedan biology, it was attacking their dimensional existence itself, trapping them in single-dimensional space and cutting them off from the quantum states that their consciousness required to function. It was, in effect, forcing one of the most advanced species in the galaxy to exist like primitive three-dimensional beings. For the Andromedans, it was a fate worse than death. When the first human mercy ship crossed into Andromedan territory, it was immediately surrounded by defensive vessels whose weapons could have destroyed entire fleets. But instead of firing, the Andromedan commander opened communications with a message that shocked every observer. Human vessel, our people are dying in ways we cannot comprehend. Our medical science, perfected over millennia, is useless against this plague. We request your assistance. For a species that had never asked for help from anyone, the words represented the collapse of everything they believed about their own superiority. Dr. Chen's response was simple and immediate. We're already on our way. As human mercy ships began landing on Andromedan worlds, carrying equipment designed to wage war against death itself, the galaxy watched and waited to see if humanity's impossible medicine could achieve yet another miracle. The stakes had never been higher. If the humans failed, the most advanced civilization in known space would fall to a plague that defied understanding. But if they succeeded, the universe would have to accept a fundamental truth about the species that painted red crosses on their warships. When humans decided to save lives, the laws of biology, physics, and common sense became merely suggestions to be overcome. The Andromedan capital world of synthesis had once been considered the crown jewel of galactic civilization. Its crystal spires reached simultaneously across 7 dimensions, creating architecture that existed in multiple realities at once. Citizens moved through spaces that folded in on themselves, their consciousness flowing freely between quantum states that allowed them to experience existence as pure thought, energy, and matter simultaneously. Now, as Dr. Sarah Chen's shuttle approached the surface, she saw only empty towers reaching toward a sky that seemed somehow flatter than it should be. The dimensional folding that had made Andromedan architecture possible had collapsed, leaving behind structures that looked like broken dreams made solid. The quantum readings are unlike anything in our databases, reported Dr. Martinez, his voice tight with concern. It's as if the plague isn't just attacking their biology, it's attacking the fundamental physics that allows them to exist. Dr. Chen studied the scanner readings as their shuttle descended toward the primary medical complex. The Andromedans had built it as a multidimensional facility that could treat patients across 17 different planes of existence simultaneously. Now it was just a very large, very empty building in normal 3-dimensional space. Life signs concentrated in the lower levels. It looks like the survivors have been forced into basements and underground facilities, the only spaces that were designed to function in single-dimensional reality. The shuttle touched down in what had been a dimensional parking facility, but was now just an empty lot. As the human medical team disembarked, they were met by an Andromedan whose appearance was shocking to anyone familiar with the species. Andromedans, in their natural state, were beings of pure energy that occasionally condensed into physical form when they needed to interact with 3-dimensional objects. This Andromedon was trapped in a single, solid body that looked exhausted by the effort of maintaining physical existence. "I am First Healer Zarthul," the being said, its voice a painful whisper, compared to the harmonic resonance Andromedans normally used for communication. "You are the humans who achieved the impossible on Zephyria Prime."
"We're here to help, Dr. Prey."
Chen replied simply. "What can you tell us about the progression of symptoms?" Zarthul led them toward the medical complex, its movements awkward and unfamiliar with purely physical locomotion. "The plague attacks our quantum consciousness first. It severs our connection to higher dimensional spaces, trapping us in this limited existence. Without access to our full-dimensional nature, our biology begins to collapse. We are not designed to exist solely in three-dimensional space." As they entered the medical facility, Dr. Chen saw something that made her pause. The Andromedans had attempted to treat their patients using equipment designed for multidimensional beings, but in their reduced state they couldn't operate the technology. Sophisticated quantum medical devices sat useless while patients suffered in dimensional isolation. How many survivors? Perhaps 50,000 on this world. Fewer on the outer colonies. We estimate total survival at less than 2% of our population. Dr. Chen's team moved through the facility with practiced efficiency, setting up equipment and assessing patients. What they found challenged everything they thought they understood about biology and consciousness. "Sarah, Doctor," Kim called out from one of the treatment areas. "These patients aren't just sick, they're existentially incomplete. It's like forcing a human to exist as only a brain, without the rest of their body." Dr. Chen examined the readings from her portable scanners. The Andromedans were showing signs of what could only be described as dimensional starvation. Their consciousness was literally dying from being unable to access the quantum states that defined their existence. "The neural bridge technology won't work here, Doctor," Martinez reported. "Human consciousness operates in three-dimensional space. We can't interface with beings who need to exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously." For the first time since the mission had begun, Dr. Chen felt a moment of doubt. The Zephyrians had been dying from a disease that attacked their nervous systems, something human medicine could understand and counter. But the Andromedans were dying from being severed from fundamental aspects of reality itself.
"Dr. Chen," Zarthul approached, its voice growing weaker, "we understand if your medicine cannot help us."
"The nature of our existence is beyond the comprehension of three-dimensional beings. We ask only that you record our final medical data for the benefit of future research." Dr. Chen looked around at the suffering Andromedans, beings whose intelligence and knowledge had advanced civilization across the galaxy, now reduced to shadows of their former selves. She thought about every impossible case she had ever treated, every patient who should have died but didn't, every time human stubbornness had overcome the limitations of medical knowledge. "Martinez, what do we know about quantum consciousness transfer? It's theoretical at best. Some experiments with human patients in comas, but nothing approaching multidimensional consciousness. What about the dimensional folding experiments from the Europa Research Station?" "Doctor?" Martinez's eyes widened. "You're not seriously considering—" "Sarah, those experiments were shut down because they nearly tore holes in space-time itself, but they worked. They allowed three-dimensional objects to exist in higher dimensional space, even if only briefly. For objects, not conscious beings. And certainly not for extended periods." Dr. Chen was already moving toward her equipment, her mind racing through possibilities that would have terrified any reasonable person. "Kim, I need you to contact the research vessels in our fleet. Tell them to begin preparing dimensional field generators. Patterson, start gathering volunteers for an experimental procedure that might kill everyone involved." "What are you planning?" Zarthul asked, hope and terror mingling in its voice. "We're going to give you back your dimensions," Dr. Chen said with the casual confidence of someone who had never met a law of physics she couldn't work around. "But first we need to create a controlled multidimensional space inside our medical bay." The next 8 hours were a masterpiece of human ingenuity applied to problems that had never been designed to have solutions. Dr. Chen's team worked with Andromedan scientists to modify human dimensional field technology, creating stable pockets of multidimensional space where Andromedan consciousness could function properly. The first test nearly destroyed the Clara Barton. The dimensional field generator created a space that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, but the interaction with the ship's three-dimensional structure caused reality to hiccup in ways that made several team members temporarily forget which direction was up. "The field is stable, but we can only maintain it for short periods," Dr. Rodriguez reported from the Mercy's hand. and only human consciousness seems able to navigate the interface between dimensional states. Dr. Chen stared at the readouts, understanding dawning. That's it. Humans can serve as dimensional anchors. We exist in three-dimensional space, but our consciousness can adapt to interface with higher dimensions temporarily. We can guide Andromedan consciousness back to full-dimensional awareness. The neural stress would be enormous, Dr. Martinez warned. Human minds aren't designed to perceive 17 dimensions of existence simultaneously. No, Dr. Chen agreed, but human minds are designed to adapt to whatever's necessary to save patients. Patterson, are you ready for another impossible procedure? Nurse Patterson, who still showed signs of mental fatigue from the Zephyrian neural bridging, straightened her shoulders. Doctor, if it helps these people, I'm ready. The procedure that followed would later be studied by xenobiologists for centuries. Human medical personnel used modified neural bridge technology to connect their consciousness to dying Andromedans, then guided them through controlled dimensional fields that allowed them to regain access to higher dimensional space. The sensation was indescribable. Nurse Patterson later reported feeling like her mind was being stretched across multiple realities simultaneously, experiencing existence as pure mathematics while still maintaining awareness of her physical body. For 17 minutes, she existed as both a three-dimensional human and a multi-dimensional consciousness, bridging the gap between impossible realities. When the first Andromedan patient successfully re-established connection to seven-dimensional space, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Its body became a shifting pattern of energy and matter, its voice returned to harmonic resonance, and its consciousness expanded back to its natural state. Impossible, Zarthal whispered as it watched its patient return to full Andromedan existence. You have given us back ourselves. But the true miracle came hours later, as reports arrived from across Andromedan space. Just as with the Zephyrians, the successful treatments were somehow spreading. Andromedans who had never been treated by human medical teams were spontaneously recovering their dimensional awareness. The Quantum Consciousness Network, Dr. Chen explained to Commander Veltar during their regular communication. When we restored dimensional awareness to individual Andromedans, their consciousness automatically shared the recovery pattern with others through their quantum entanglement networks. The treatment is spreading itself across their entire species. Veltar stared at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Human mercy ships had now successfully treated 3 different species, using methods that violated everything the galactic scientific community understood about biology, consciousness, and reality itself. Dr. Chen, what exactly is human medicine? Dr. Chen looked exhausted. Her hair was disheveled, her medical coat was stained with substances that probably didn't exist in three-dimensional space, and her eyes held the weary satisfaction of someone who had just spent days fighting the impossible and winning. Commander, human medicine is what happens when you refuse to let people die, regardless of whether saving them should be possible. We learnt medicine while fighting wars, surviving plagues, and adapting to environments that should have killed us. We don't treat diseases. We fight them. We don't accept limitations. We overcome them. She paused, looking back at the Andromedan patients, who were slowly returning to their natural state of multidimensional existence. Most species develop medicine to work within the laws of biology and physics. Humans develop medicine to win against anything that tries to kill our patients. When you spend thousands of years learning that death is just another enemy to be defeated, you develop tools that can fight on any battlefield against any opponent.
Even opponents that exist across multiple dimensions? Especially opponents that exist across multiple dimensions.
The universe keeps presenting us with new challenges, Commander. Humans keep finding new ways to meet them. As the human fleet prepared to depart Andromedan space, leaving behind a species that was rapidly returning to full health, reports arrived that changed everything. The plague had been detected in the galactic core systems, where the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy maintained their capital worlds. Species that had existed for millions of years, whose technology and knowledge dwarfed anything the younger races had achieved, were beginning to show symptoms of an infection that had already consumed dozens of worlds. And every one of them was requesting immediate assistance from the human mercy fleet. Dr. Chan stood in the Clara Barton's bridge, looking at star charts that showed the scope of their next mission. They would be treating species whose biology was based on dark matter, whose consciousness existed as living mathematics, and whose technology had transcended physical reality entirely. Doctor, Martinez said quietly. We're being asked to save the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Beings who were exploring the cosmos when humanity was still learning to make fire. Chen nodded, already planning equipment modifications and treatment protocols for patients she couldn't yet imagine. Then we'd better not disappoint them, she said simply. After all, they're still people, and people deserve to live. The Human Mercy Fleet changed course toward the galactic core, carrying equipment designed to fight death itself, and staffed by people who had never learned that some battles couldn't be won. The galactic core was a place where younger species feared to travel. Ancient civilizations had claimed the region around the galaxy's central black hole, building structures that harnessed the fundamental forces of the universe itself. Here lived the architects, who had learned to manipulate space-time as easily as humans shaped clay. Here dwelt the mathematicians, beings of pure logic whose consciousness existed as living equations. Here the transcendent had evolved beyond physical existence entirely, becoming creatures of will and thought that could remake reality through the power of their collective belief. These were the species that had guided galactic civilization for millions of years, sharing their knowledge with younger races, while maintaining a careful distance from the chaotic universe beyond the core. They were gods among mortals, immortal beings whose understanding of existence was so advanced that they barely qualified as biological entities at all, and they were dying. Doctor. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Clara Barton, watching as her Mercy fleet approached the core systems. The sight that greeted them defied comprehension. Massive structures that had existed for eons were collapsing into normal space-time, their exotic matter construction failing as the beings who maintained them succumbed to the plague. The architect homeworld is showing massive structural failures, reported Dr. Blake Martinez, his voice tight with awe and horror. Entire continents are falling out of folded space and crashing into each other. It's like watching the universe forget how to maintain its own physics. Commander Velta's voice crackled over the communication system. Dr. Chen, the Galactic Defense Fleet is maintaining a perimeter around the core systems, but we're out of our depth here. These civilizations have technology that could unmake entire star systems, and we have no idea what happens when that technology fails catastrophically. Dr. Chen studied the sensor readings showing the scope of the disaster. The plague had reached the most advanced beings in the galaxy, and their unique natures meant that their deaths were causing reality itself to become unstable. How many survivors are we looking at? The Transcendent report 60% losses, but their concept of individual existence is fluid. The mathematicians have lost their ability to maintain coherent consciousness. They're fragmenting into isolated calculations. The architects are trapped in three-dimensional space and can't maintain their world-shaping abilities. Dr. Chen absorbed this information with the calm focus of someone who had faced impossible odds so many times that they had become routine. Around her, the human medical teams prepared equipment that had been continuously modified throughout their journey across the galaxy. Neural bridges designed for multidimensional consciousness, quantum field generators that could stabilize reality distortions, and medical scanners that could detect diseases that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. Dr. Chen. Dr. Kim approached with a tablet full of analysis data. We're dealing with patients whose biology transcends everything we understand about life itself. The transcendent don't have physical bodies in any conventional sense. The mathematicians exist as conscious equations. The architects build their bodies from manipulated space-time. How do we treat patients who exist as abstractions? For a moment, Dr. Kroll. Chen was quiet, looking out at the chaotic beauty of the galactic core. Then she smiled. The same expression her team had learned to associate with incoming miracles. Kim, what did we learn from the Zephyrians? That human consciousness can stabilize alien neural patterns through direct interface. And from the Andromedans? That human adaptability allows us to serve as bridges between different states of existence. Exactly. Every species we've treated has taught us something new about the nature of consciousness, reality, and what it means to be alive. Now we're facing patients who exist as pure abstractions, conscious mathematics, and manipulated physics. She turned to address her entire team, who had gathered in the medical bay. People, we're about to attempt something that redefines what medicine means. We're going to treat patients who don't have bodies, cure diseases that exist as logical paradoxes, and fight death in creatures that transcend mortality itself. The medical bay fell silent except for the hum of equipment that had been pushed beyond its design specifications so many times that it had effectively become alien technology operated by human determination. But here's what I know about human medicine, Dr. Salim. Chen continued. We don't treat bodies, we treat people. Whether those people exist as flesh and blood, multidimensional energy, quantum consciousness, or living mathematics doesn't matter. What matters is that they want to live, and we have the ability to help them. The first contact came from the transcendent homeworld, where beings that had evolved beyond physical existence were somehow dying despite having transcended mortality centuries ago. Human healers. The message came directly into the minds of everyone aboard the human ships, bypassing conventional communication entirely. Our essence fragments as the plague consumes our unity. We who have conquered death find ourselves facing extinction. Can your medicine heal that which has no form? Doctor.
Chen's response was immediate. We can try. And when humans try to save lives, we don't usually fail.
The transcendent realm existed as pure consciousness made manifest through collective will. As human shuttles approached their world, reality shifted around them, accommodating the presence of three-dimensional beings in a space that had no fixed physical properties. Dr. Chen found herself standing in a vast chamber that looked like the inside of a living thought. Geometric patterns of pure meaning flowed through spaces that folded in on themselves, while beings of condensed willpower gathered around the human medical team. We exist as unified consciousness, the Transcendent explained, their communication bypassing language entirely. But the plague attacks our unity, forcing us back into individual awareness. We fragment into isolated thoughts, losing the collective nature that defines our existence. Dr. Chen examined the phenomenon with instruments that had been modified to detect consciousness itself. What she found was surprisingly familiar, a pattern of neural isolation that resembled what they had seen in other species, but operating on the level of pure thought rather than biological neural networks.
It's the same plague, she told her team over their neural communication links.
It attacks the fundamental nature of consciousness for each species. For biological beings, it targets their neural systems. For the Transcendent, it disrupts their collective awareness. The treatment that followed required human medical personnel to literally merge their consciousness with beings of pure thought. Using modified neural bridge technology, they created links between human individual awareness and transcendent collective consciousness, allowing isolated transcendent fragments to remember how to rejoin their unified existence. Nurse Patterson, who had become the team's expert in impossible neural interfaces, found herself existing as both individual human consciousness and part of a vast collective awareness that spanned multiple realities. It's like being part of a symphony that spans the universe, she reported, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't existed in human speech before the neural bridge activation. They're not just individuals who think together. They're a single consciousness that experiences itself as multiple perspectives. As the treatment progressed, something unprecedented happened. The Transcendent didn't just recover their collective nature, they began to incorporate human consciousness patterns into their unified awareness. For the first time in their existence, they experienced individual determination, personal stubbornness, and the uniquely human refusal to accept defeat.
This is
remarkable, the Transcendent communicated, their collective voice now carrying undertones of human emotion. Your consciousness patterns teach us new ways of existing. We have learned unity, but you have shown us the strength that comes from individual will. Similar scenes played out across the core systems as human medical teams treated beings that existed as living mathematics and entities that had built their bodies from manipulated space-time. In each case, the humans didn't just cure the plague, they shared something fundamentally human with their patients. The mathematicians, whose consciousness existed as pure logic, learned about intuition and creative problem-solving. The architects, who shaped reality through will alone, discovered the power of emotional determination and stubborn refusal to accept limitations. But the true miracle came when reports arrived from across the galaxy. The treatments weren't just spreading through quantum networks or dimensional connections, they were propagating through the fundamental structure of consciousness itself. Dr. Chen, Commander Veltar's voice carried a note of awe. We're receiving reports from species that haven't had any contact with your medical teams. The plague is retreating across the entire galaxy, not just in systems where you've provided treatment. Dr. Chen stood in the medical bay of the Clara Barton, surrounded by equipment that had been modified so many times it barely resembled its original design. Around her, human medical personnel worked alongside beings that existed as pure mathematics, conscious energy, and manipulated reality. The consciousness network effect, she explained, her voice tired but satisfied. We didn't just treat individual species, we created a galaxy-wide immune response by connecting different types of consciousness through human neural patterns. Every species we've treated has learned something about the human approach to surviving the impossible. What exactly did you teach them? Dr. Chen looked around at her team, humans who had volunteered to merge their consciousness with aliens, to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, to bridge the gap between reality and abstraction, or to save lives of beings they had never met. We taught them to be stubborn, she said simply. Humans have never been the strongest, fastest, or smartest species in the universe.
But we might be the most stubborn. When something tries to kill us, we take it personally.
When experts tell us that a situation is hopeless, we disagree. When the universe presents us with problems that have no solutions, we find solutions anyway.
She paused, watching as a being of pure mathematics solved its own existence like an equation, now incorporating human emotional logic into its calculations. Every species we've treated has connected to that stubbornness through the neural interfaces. They've learned that death isn't inevitable, it's just another problem to be solved. And when you have billions of conscious beings across the galaxy all refusing to accept defeat, the plague doesn't stand a chance.
3 weeks later, the last reported case of the Zephyrian plague was successfully treated on a small agricultural world in the Outer Rim.
The disease that had threatened to consume galactic civilization had been eliminated not through superior technology or advanced medical knowledge, but through the simple human refusal to let people die if there was any way to prevent it. Dr.
Chen stood in the observation deck of the Clara Barton, looking out at stars that now harbored healthy worlds filled with species that had learned something new about themselves. The Zephyrians had discovered that their collective consciousness could incorporate individual determination.
The Andromedans had learned to exist fully in single dimensions when necessary, while maintaining their multidimensional nature. The ancient species of the core had evolved beyond their previous limitations by integrating human emotional resilience into their transcendent existence.
Commander Veltar materialized on the screen behind her, his expression thoughtful.
Dr. Chen, the Galactic Council has asked me to convey their gratitude for humanity's actions during the plague crisis. They're also curious about something.
What's that, Commander?
They want to understand why humans paint red crosses on their warships. After everything we've witnessed, the symbolism has taken on meanings that our xenobiologists are still trying to comprehend.
Doctor. Chen smiled, the expression carrying the weary satisfaction of someone who had spent months fighting the impossible and winning. Commander, humans learned long ago that the difference between a warship and a hospital ship isn't the vessel itself, it's the intention of the people aboard it. We paint red crosses on our mercy ships because mercy isn't passive. It's active, aggressive, and absolutely ruthless in its refusal to accept defeat. She turned to look directly at the camera. When humans go to war, we're fighting to destroy our enemies. When humans practice medicine, we're fighting to save lives. But in both cases, we're fighting, and we're fighting to win. The Red Cross doesn't represent peaceful healing, Commander. It represents the declaration of war against death itself. Veltar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully.
And when humans declare war, we don't lose, Dr. Chen finished.
We find a way to win, no matter what the odds, no matter what the experts say is possible, and no matter what the universe thinks it can do to stop us. As the human Mercy fleet began its journey back to Earth, every species in the galaxy understood something new about their newest neighbors. The creatures who had painted red crosses on their warships weren't just healers. They were warriors in humanity's oldest and most important war, the war against death, disease, and despair. And as the galaxy had learned, when humans went to war with these ancient enemies, they brought weapons that could overcome any defense: determination, adaptability, and the absolute refusal to accept that some battles couldn't be won.
The plague was gone, but its defeat had left something new in its wake. A galaxy-wide network of consciousness that had learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach. Sometimes, the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology, knowledge, or even advanced evolution. Sometimes, it's just the simple, stubborn refusal to let people die when you have the power to save them.
And as every species in the galaxy now understood, humans would always have that power, because they had learned to make the impossible possible through the simple act of caring enough to try.